A manhunt is underway after a convicted sex offender was mistakenly released from HMP Chelmsford.
41-year-old Hadush Kebatu, an asylum seeker from Ethiopia, was jailed, if you remember, last month for 12 months after he sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. That case, of course, infuriated people in Epping. You remember the protests around the Bell Inn.
Yeah, that was all around this. So this is a person who is known, who has been talked about a lot. Anyway, the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary David Lammy has expressed his outrage.
Well, I'm appalled and livid on behalf of the public that Kebatu is at large. He should be deported back to Ethiopia after the sexual assaults that he's committed. And of course, there is now a manhunt with Essex Police, the Metropolitan Police and British Transport Police looking for him. We know that he boarded a train and is at large in London. And of course I've asked for a full investigation into what's happened, and an officer has been suspended.
And of course that mobile phone footage that we've just shown there was filmed by a passer-by who recognised him. And thought, isn't that... just thought they would take the film just in case. And it was. In fact, what he was doing was asking the way to the station, apparently. And one of our viewers earlier pointed out that in order to get to the station from where he was filmed, he had to walk past the court and past a police station. I mean, it just rubs it in, doesn't it? Anyway, that was David Lammy there, saying he was furious. And the Conservatives also have called the blunder unacceptable.
We certainly need a public inquiry into how this dangerous illegal immigrant, who is also a child sex offender, got released. We also need an urgent apology from Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood and Justice Secretary David Lammy, who have presided over this fiasco. It is an absolute disgrace that this incompetent Labour government has allowed this dangerous man out onto our streets, and this evening he is posing a risk to children around Essex.
The editor of Spiked Online is Tom Slater, and he's here. Morning, Tom. How much do... I mean, right, the politicians, opposition politicians, are wanting to blame this directly on the government. Do we blame the government? Do we just blame the system or an individual that's failed at the bottom, is what David Lammy seems to be want to... Or is this a sign of the fact that the whole system is falling apart, which is governmental responsibility?
No, I think it is the latter. I think this shows that the whole system is totally broken. If he had absconded, that would be bad enough. That would have been an oversight. Questions would have to be asked, inquiries would have to be made. But the fact that he was actually formally released, the fact that he was given his £72 and is the items that they're entitled to when they're released from prison, the fact that he is essentially the most high-profile sex offender in the country at the moment, so much so that people see him on the street and know to film him because they are surprised to see him out on the streets, and yet he has been let free. And of course this is a question for the prison services, who I understand have already fired the officer who was directly involved. There's a question for the police, but we should remember he should never have been in this country in the first place. So from top to bottom it shows that the British state is broken. But of course the buck does ultimately stop with the politicians, so who are in charge, who are presiding over the system. So to see David Lammy kind of saying, I'm as upset as you are, it doesn't really cut it in this circumstance.
No, but I mean, it's not just this government, surely. It's multiple governments, probably over more than the last 14 years as well, who simply haven't invested enough in the prison service, or at least addressing these sort of problems. And, I mean, journalists know that talking about prison is never very popular. It doesn't sell newspapers talking about prison problems, does it? Until you come to a crisis like this. But it's the same for politicians. Talking about the welfare of prisoners and that we must invest more in our prison system and things like that doesn't go down well in politics either, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I think it's that's one of the reasons that we've got all of the problems in the prison system, in particular, the fact that the capacity issues and so on, the fact that we've been having to release loads of prisoners early purely just to make up space, shows you the sort of systemic issues there. But at the same time, there is just such a thing as plain old, unforgivable incompetence. This was a very high-profile case. This is a dangerous individual. This is someone who poses a genuine threat to the public. Put all those things together, you would imagine that anyone worth their salt would ensure that this kind of came off smoothly, that there would be almost extra incentive to make sure that he made it onto that deportation flight as he was slated to do so. And yet that hasn't taken place. And I think it's just adding to a sense that the public have, quite understandably, The British state is so dysfunctional, it's actually become a kind of menace to public safety for all the reasons that we've been talking about.
Well, and this is why, as much as people like David Lammy will want to sort of say how livid he is and look at the people, the grassroots people working on this, where there's been a direct failure, this is like the last straw, isn't it? I mean, it's yet another major problem on the asylum system, which is which the vast majority of people in this country are up in arms about.
No, and if you just think the stories that we've seen over the course of the past year or so, you were trailing the Sudanese migrant who's just been found guilty of murdering that hotel worker. If you think about a couple of weeks ago, there was the Afghan migrant came in on a small boat, was fleeing 19 offences in Sweden, if I remember correctly, and was sentenced the other week for sending death threats to Nigel Farage. You think a little bit further back, I think it was the tail end of last year, where we had another manhunt after Abdul Azedi, who was the Afghan acid attacker, who it turned out, as that story unfurled, that he had come to this country illegally, claimed asylum, was turned down, had a fake conversion to Christianity, managed to get asylum on the second attempt, even though he'd committed 2 sexual offences in the intervening period. This creates a picture of a system which is either a kind of prisoner of its own virtue signalling, being far too naive in relation to some of the people who are coming into this country and exploiting the loopholes in the system, but also it's just so dysfunctional that even when someone commits an offence, they're not dealt with in a prompt and secure fashion. And you can no wonder that the summer has been defined by fury about this particular issue.
And you wonder if any government, any change of government, could actually do anything about it within 4-year, 5-year term.
I think there's some very immediate things that a government that wanted to do something about it and wasn't squeamish about doing something about it could do something about it. I mean, it's quite clear now that in terms of properly being able to deport people when there's an obvious case to do so, they shouldn't be here, they've committed offences. I mean, there was even concern in the run-up to the Ethiopian Epping migrants' deportation flight that they would still be subject to legal challenges. That could have ended up being the story here. But I think the issue of Labour in particular is because this is a government run by human rights lawyers. They are almost constitutionally incapable of doing the kinds of things that they would need to do to smooth that process, even though plenty of governments in Europe are now looking at the ECHR and human rights setup afresh.
OK, Tom, thanks very much indeed. Yeah, interesting about not being squeamish about these sort of things. It's a good way of putting it, actually.
So we're going to have to be squeamish? Well, we're doing...
Well, we are. We're squeamish at the moment,
Well, I mean,
aren't we?
yeah, we're going to have to be non-squeamish.
Non-squeamish.
What's the opposite of squeamish? Yeah, we've just got to get on with it, haven't we? We're joined now by the MP for Chelmsford, Mary Goldman, who is calling for a public inquiry into that mistaken release. Good morning, Marie. Are you? Oh, yes, you are there. I mean, yeah, we definitely need an inquiry, and it needs to be very transparent, doesn't it?
Yes, it absolutely does. And we need a proper public inquiry, a national inquiry, because this happened, unfortunately, in my constituency, from Chelmsford Prison, of which, Chelmsford Prison is a big feature in the heart of Chelmsford. And, my local community are very used to having Chelmsford Prison here. And it's really unfortunate that it's happened here. But it could have happened anywhere else in the country. Indeed, it has happened in other places in the country. Now, there's a report that came out from His Majesty's Prisons and Probation Service that looked into the year leading up to March 2025, and it discovered that 262 prisoners were released early in error, and that's up from 115 in the previous 12 months. So this is not just something that's happened in Chelmsford. This has happened in other places too. Now, of course, this was incredibly high profile, what has happened yesterday. And, well, I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you? I mean, it is incredible to believe and to know that this has happened. I'm incredibly frustrated that prison service seems to be saying, oh, well, it's OK. We've suspended one of the prison officers who was working on it, that he or she made a mistake. Any system that relies on one person to decide whether to release a prisoner or not, I think is a system that's not fit for purpose. We need to understand exactly what has gone wrong. And I think for that, we need a full and rapid public inquiry.
The trouble is, you say rapid, it's all relevant, is it? I mean, a rapid public inquiry could still take a couple of years on something like this. I mean, surely there has got to be some bread and butter, common sense things that can be changed.
And I completely agree with you. What we do need to understand what went wrong. So that is why we do need a full inquiry. But I think you're right to say that there are some common sense changes. You know, there shouldn't be just one person it shouldn't even be possible to blame just one person for the accidental release of a prisoner. It should be a full system that's in place to make sure that doesn't happen. It shouldn't be possible for this, 262 people released early by mistake, over the course of the past year or so. That is completely unacceptable. And it is an example of a system that is totally broken. So yes, there are things that we need to put in place straight away, but we also need to understand exactly what went wrong here.
Do you think any government, any new government, could actually do enough within the next term, as it were, if there was a new government again? Do you think they could do anything to address these huge problems?
I think that's a really good question. I think the really important thing is actually that politicians work together to recognise that really this shouldn't be a political football. This is really a systems and process point of view, and we should be able to work together on systems and processes to make sure that they work and that they're fit for purpose. I think with a government that has the right will to make the changes, yes, I do think it's possible. I think it's possible for Labour to do it actually within the remainder of their term. We have to believe that it's possible. The prison service wasn't always in this terrible state. There are plenty of other public services that weren't always in the terrible state that they are now. So it is possible for them to be in a good state. We just need the will to make it happen. And we need to get on and do it. Enough procrastinating. This is what's happened yesterday is just an example and a reminder that we just need to get on and do it. But of course, the most important thing is that Kobatu is captured, that he's put back into custody, and then he's deported.